Netflix Forever highlights some parents' biggest fears, and I'm not even talking about the sex tape. What's good, beautiful people? It's your boy Chris Logue, and I'm your new favorite therapist. Welcome to the channel. I appreciate you spending your time with me. I'm a therapist, and here I break down mental health themes and topics from movies, TV shows, and other aspects of pop culture. Today, I want to talk about the Netflix show Forever. My wife and I finished it a few days ago. It's a cute little high school relationship drama revolving around Keisha and Justin, but what stood out most to us were their parents. Throughout our binge, we paused many times to talk about their parents' reactions, decisions, and behaviors. We're young parents with an almost 3-year-old boy and a newborn daughter, so we're always conversing about how we will prepare for and handle different situations with our kids. The show highlights some of our biggest fears, ones that I feel are also big for other millennial parents. I thought it would be cool to share some of the points from our convos and others that I've been reflecting on, so here we are. Spoiler alert for those who haven't finished the show yet, bookmark this video and come back after you finish it. All right, you've been warned. Let's get into it. I want to start with Shelly, Keisha's mom, and some of her fears. Shelly had Keisha during her early 20s. Getting pregnant altered her life and deferred her dreams. She mostly raised Keisha by herself, although she does have a village of support with Keisha's grandfather George and Keisha's cousins. Keisha's father Quincy wasn't completely absent from Keisha's life, but he may not have done as much in raising her. More on him later. Being a young single parent certainly impacted how Shelly decided to raise her daughter. One of her fears was that Keisha could get pregnant at an early age and not have a chance to reach her dreams and goals. She didn't want Keisha to experience what she went through. Don't get pregnant was drilled into Keisha, so much so that it created a situation where Keisha didn't feel comfortable talking about sex with her mom, and more importantly, about the sex tape. Shelly ultimately doesn't want Keisha to get pregnant because she wants Keisha to reach a higher status than she has. Keisha has been very smart from a young age, as noted by the family nickname Urkel. Shelly supported Keisha's intelligence, dreams, and plans as best as she could throughout her childhood and continues to do so, working long, hard hours and budgeting like hell so Keisha can go to a private school that they can barely afford. This set an expectation for Keisha that she goes to college and becomes something better. I don't view this expectation as a bad thing. Most parents want their kids to do better than they did and will do whatever they can to support their kids and set them up for that. We don't know how this expectation was communicated. But if it was delivered similarly to don't get pregnant, it probably came off as desperation instead of aspiration. You have to do this versus this is what I would like to see for you are two different things. The former is more pressure packed. Pressure is not necessarily a bad thing, but in this case, added to don't get pregnant, it intensifies the idea that Keisha can't make a mistake. So much so that when a sex tape and its aftermath happened, she didn't feel she could be completely honest with her mother and didn't tell her everything. This is one of the big fears of parents, that our kids won't feel comfortable discussing certain things with us, particularly sexual things. I asked my wife, how do we create an environment where our kids feel comfortable talking about things like sex? She responded, we have to consistently engage in open, shameless, non-judgmental conversations with them about sex, normalizing it and letting them know that it's okay and welcome to talk about it. I really appreciate my wife and the fact that we can talk through these fears and make a plan for the future. Which gets me back to Shelly. I don't think she's a bad parent. She's actually a pretty damn good one. She wanted to protect and prepare her daughter. She did that the best way she could based on her experiences. She impressed don't get pregnant on Keisha, had high expectations of Keisha, and she bust her ass to support Keisha's plan for reaching them. Parenting is hard. It's increasingly harder for single parents without someone else to offer additional perspective and support. Single or otherwise, as parents, in our attempts to protect and prepare our kids, we might be applying pressure and creating situations where they don't feel like they can make mistakes or talk to us about certain things or even live up to our expectations. But we have to do these things because who else is going to prepare them for life? In Keisha's case, she did have to have a plan to get out the hood, and it's true that a few mistakes could have derailed that plan. Shelly did what she had to do. She could have done some things differently, so Keisha could have talked about the sex tape and felt more supported in the aftermath. I don't have all the answers, but I wonder about it. As parents, how do we do things that encourage trust and conversation so that we can provide the protection and support we intend to? I want to turn to Dawn and some of her fears. From onset, Dawn appears to be what some might classify as an overbearing mother. She's on top of her children about their academics, homework, athletics, and other responsibilities. Others might say she's supportive of her children and is doing anything she can to ensure their success in the future. In regards to Justin, there's a plan that they've had in place that would lead to his success. Use basketball to go to a D1 school. And she wants to ensure that he's working towards that plan. Coincidentally, the plan is not that different from Keisha's. Justin's plan is not really his as much as it is Dawn's. That on its face is not a bad thing. As parents, we envision our children's future long before they do and chart the path towards it. The difficult thing for me is that Dawn has a very particular definition of success and believes there's a very narrow pathway to get it, hers. And she doesn't make room for what Justin might want or view as success. This is where one of her biggest fears come in, that Justin won't be successful. This is something that most parents fear because we know it's a wild world out there and we want our kids to be able to survive. In this case, though, I think there's more to it than that. Dawn and Eric have achieved a high level of financial security, so much so that Justin's survival is not in jeopardy if he doesn't succeed. I think Dawn is so invested in his success because it's a reflection on her, and if he isn't successful, that would mean she failed as a parent, which is another fear, so two baked in one. These fears are some that I think we millennial parents can align ourselves with. We are hyper-focused on not failing as parents. Our children's success will be one of those indicators. We, like Dawn and Eric, have achieved high levels of success, as indicated by our educational attainment and wealth building. Like most parents, we want our kids to achieve as much as or even more than we have. We are working hard to provide them with resources, experiences, and opportunities, some of which we may not have had when we were their age, all in hopes of ensuring their success and that we aren't considered bad parents. The success thing feeds into something else, though. Justin becoming successful is really the minimum expectation for Dawn. In actuality, she really would like him to be exceptional. It appears that everything she and Eric have provided for him, sending him to a $40,000 a year elite private school, tutors, education support apps, etc., are to help him with his learning differences and make sure he's college ready. A part of that is true, but it's also true that it's all about making him look competitive in his admission process. Even him playing basketball is about how it will help him get to a D1 school via scholarships or making his app look better. Again, on his face, this isn't a bad thing. All parents want their kids to have the best shot at getting into good schools. We later find out that Dawn doesn't want him to attend an ordinary school. She wants him to go to her alma mater, Northwestern. Yes, that Northwestern. She's asking him to be exceptional. But what if he's not? What if he's just average? It's a big fear of hers and something that is possibly unacceptable, especially considering what she and Eric have achieved, but also what they're pouring into him. There's a possibility that he is just average, at least academically. I mean, look at basketball. He was riding the bench. I agree there was probably some bias and preferential treatment involved, but what if he's actually just a role player and not the star? Are they okay with that? There's a chance that he might be exceptional in music, but would that be acceptable? This is another fear that I think sits heavily with millennial parents. What if our kids aren't exceptional or even as good as we are? Are we okay with that? A few things I want Dawn and us to investigate regarding those fears of our kids not being exceptional or even successful. Do we recognize that we're asking our kids to be exceptional? What if they aren't exceptional? Would that be okay? Why is it important for them to be exceptional or successful? How much of it has to do with them? How much of it has to do with us? What are our definitions of success? What's acceptable? What's unacceptable? Why? And ultimately, what happens if they're not successful? Maybe this type of investigation could help us control our fears or find other ways to support our kids, or at the very least be okay if our kids aren't reading at age 3 or solving trigonometry equations in the 5th grade. I don't know. It's worth a try. Justin did get into Northwestern, so maybe I'm wrong about him being average, or maybe that was the Hollywood happy ending effect. Who knows? All right, not being able to protect their kids is a fear that most parents have. There were a few moments when this fear rose up in Dawn and Shelly, sparking deeper conversations with me and my wife. After Keisha runs into Dawn on the vineyard, Dawn wants to keep it a secret from Justin. She even tells Jaden, his little brother, not to say anything. As she's explaining it to Eric, she mentioned that she wants to protect him from the girl who broke his heart. Avoiding certain situations is a way she feels she can protect him. We see this later when she doesn't want him driving after dark for fear of the police. In this situation with Keisha on the vineyard, avoidance could have been a viable option. Maybe they wouldn't see each other and maybe it wouldn't be an issue until he bumps into her somewhere in LA. Eric, counters Dawn's strategy and says it's okay for the boy to get hurt, and later engages Justin in a conversation about not hiding, encourages him to confront his feelings and hear what Keisha has to say. Instead of trying to protect him, Eric was there to support him and prepare him. Eric later supports Justin's request to drive out to Keisha and prepares him for an interaction with the police. We also know he prepares him to practice safe sex, even making him practice in the dark. Which gets me back to Keisha. When she finally told her mom about the sex tape, her mother's reaction was exactly what Keisha had feared. But who can blame Shelly? There was a lot of tough information to hear. It's extremely difficult to have a measured reaction in a moment like that. I did appreciate that Shelly followed up with Keisha and spoke to her about how hard it was for her not to have been there to protect her during the sex tape aftermath. That was also why she was going so hard with taking legal action. She wanted to make up for not initially protecting Keisha. That wasn't what Keisha wanted, though, or what she needed. She needed her mother to be supportive and compassionate, which Shelly eventually is after a conversation with a therapist. Big shout out to Shelly, seeing the therapist who helped her recognize that she didn't create the space for Keisha to share things like that with her. I always appreciate the acknowledgement of Black folks in therapy and that therapy has a positive impact right away. Just playing, it is a process. Anyway, both situations made me think about how we want to protect our kids, but we know that there are some situations we can't protect them from. In conversation with my wife, I came to the conclusion that the best we can do is prepare them as best as we possibly can and be there to support them in the aftermath of anything. My wife agreed and added, we can't let our fear of not being able to protect them or fear of all the things prevent us from being there to support them. I really appreciate that woman. Real quickly, I want to talk about Quincy, Keisha's father, because his fear is a common one too. We find out that Quincy has been minimally involved in Keisha's life, mostly through sending her pictures of locations where he's playing baseball. He was a promising young baseball player, got drafted, but listened to his father George's advice about going to school instead of languishing in the minors. He ends up riding the bench in college, and his baseball career never took off the way it could have. Because of this, Quincy could feel like his father ruined his life, or at least had a role in it not turning out how he wanted it to. George was just trying to protect him based on his experiences. I think the fear of his father ruining his life subconsciously led to him not being an active parent for Keisha. Perhaps he feared doing or saying something that would ruin her life. He might have been thinking, I can't do too much damage if I'm not around, which is a thought that we've heard from a lot of men who are not active in their children's lives. I wonder what would have happened had he recognized and confronted that fear earlier. We'll never know. I will say I appreciate that he had been in some form of reflection enough to recognize that he made Shelly his trophy when other areas of his life weren't as certain, something he saw happening with Justin and Keisha. Sharing that reflection with Keisha gave her a different perspective and provided fortification for an impending separation. Instead of saying something that could ruin her life, he actually said something very supportive. This was a reminder that instead of letting our fears deactivate us, we should investigate them, understand, and reconcile them so that we can be active and supportive for our children. One final fear, perhaps the biggest one of all, is that after all the work we put into the kids, they won't turn out how we think they should. Very scary. I'm going to be working through that fear in others for a long time, but ultimately, I do feel confident that the kids are going to be all right. Woo! I've said a lot. Let me know how you feel in the comments below. Do you agree with the fears I outlined? Could you see them playing out on the show? Are you holding some of these fears yourself? If you're rolling around fearlessly, please share your secrets. I appreciate you spending your time with me. Like, comment, subscribe, share with someone else who might find this intriguing. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.